We're going to bring in Ahmed Helal. He's the director of MENA region at the Global Counsel. It's a strategic advisory firm. Thanks very much indeed for being with us. There was always a lot of speculation that if the Netanyahu coalition felt that it wasn't achieving the goals that it had originally set out, that it could push the military to intensify the action. We're certainly reporting on a lot of what's been happening over the last few hours or so. That seems to be an intensification. What's your assessment of what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank?
Well, partly, the Israelis don't have a finite objective for the war in Israel and Hamas, against Hamas in Gaza. You can't extinguish all Hamas operatives and fighters. They are in the tens of thousands. They are entrenched with the civilian population. And when you fail to articulate your goals in combat, you can fail in everything. So what Israel is doing, intensifying its bombing campaigns in the north, in the south, in the center, is sending a message to the domestic audience that we are big, we are strong, we will not be defeated by a small, non-state actor. And you have to go back to why this is an existential war for Israel. The attacks of October 7 threw into question the very idea that an independent homeland for Jews is the safest place for Jews to live. So Israel, from its point of view, has to attack in this way. They have to achieve what they view as decisive military victory. Their security doctrine, since the days of Ben Gurion, rests on three pillars. One is deterrence, two is early warning, and three is decisive military victory. When the first two faltered, they fell back to their third pillar of the traditional security doctrine, which is to completely neutralize the military capability of the enemy and destroy the enemy's resolve to continue fighting. And so that is the current track they are taking. So to expand on that, because we heard from Yoav Gallant, who talked to the Knesset yesterday, and he was making the point that Israel is coming under attack on several fronts. Now, we know that Israel is dealing with what it perceives as a threat from Hezbollah, but it is also dealing with a longer-term threat as it perceives it from Iran as well. And, of course, we had the killing of a senior Iranian military figure by Israeli forces in Syria just the last 24 hours. That in and of itself seems like a somewhat, to somebody who's looking at it from the outside, a somewhat provocative thing to do given the circumstances. Talk to us about how all of that is tying into this what you're telling us about this appeal to a domestic audience. They're trying to message to the Israeli public that this menace, Iran, that is ultimately behind all these non-state actors that encircle Israel today, that we're taking the fight to them. And of course, it's a significant escalation, taking out the top Iranian military advisor in the IRGC in Syria. This person was an ally of Qasem Soleimani, who was the venerated leader of the IRGC that America took out in 2020 in Iraq. But you have to take a step back a little bit and think about Iran's expansion in the region. Iran has been the single greatest beneficiary of all the regional wars that have happened since America invaded Iraq. They have been able to build up the capabilities of its Shia proxies in Iraq, an example being Kataib Hezbollah, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, creating a front there in northern Israel, and the Houthis in Yemen, and the Assad regime in Syria. So they've created what they're calling an axis of resistance. And this is how they project their power. And this is how they ensure the continuity of the Islamic Republic. For them, it's an ideology that their claim to leadership in the Islamic world is through these proxies and appearing to the Arab street, to the Muslim street, that they are the only state that's actually doing anything in a concrete way to help Hamas through rhetoric, through the support, financial support, training Hamas operatives and Hamas leaders. And it's, for them, strategically, a welcome distraction from the instability that the regime has been facing domestically. They have been rocked by one protest movement after another. Recently over the treatment of women and freedoms and the killing in police custody of a woman who wasn't wearing the hijab. So this for them is projecting power, and it's ensuring regime continuity and stability. Of course, it's a provocation, and Iran will find a way to respond to Israel, and it already is. They're already partially blockading Israel through the Houthis, who are harassing vessels in the South Red Sea and preventing manufactured goods, fuel, chemicals from reaching Israel through the Red Sea.
Given the balance of power that you were describing there, who do you think is the greater threat to each other, Israel to Iran or Iran to Israel?
Well, I think the statements of the defense minister tells you a lot. I mean, they are fighting a multi-arena war in 7 jurisdictions. And Iran can have plausible deniability that it isn't necessarily in a war against another state. They are supporting proxies, that is well known. And so they have leverage. They have greater leverage than the Israelis. The Israelis are engaged in a full-out war in Gaza. They have hundreds of thousands of Israelis who have been displaced from the north of the country. They are not able to go back because Hezbollah is engaged in a low-intensity war with them through missiles and rockets. And of course, so the short answer is that Iran simply has more leverage and more attack points against Israel than vice versa.
Mm-hmm. I want to bring you back to the focus on Israel, because there's a lot of speculation that Benjamin Netanyahu's own political future is tied in with the duration of the war. How much do you think that is going to influence what we see and over the coming weeks, possibly months, according to the Netanyahu coalition, and also how that will play into the nature of the conflict as it progresses over that time?
Yeah. Netanyahu is held responsible by the Israeli public for the greatest national trauma since the founding of the Jewish state. This conflict is often compared to Yom Kippur in 1973, but it's much worse in actual fact. That war was waged by 2 state actors, Egypt and Syria, with 2 organized armies. This is a non-state actor, Hamas, ostensibly much weaker, without an organized army. It is a militia. It is a militant group. This is humiliating for Netanyahu. It destroys his legacy as Mr. Security, the strongman that he has branded himself as. And the Israeli public are furious, and they are frustrated that their security apparatus let them down, and that they are unable to kill the upper echelons of Hamas leadership in the form of Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed al-Deif. So there are no clear wins yet in this military campaign for Israel. If devastation and the images of devastation and atrocity is how they quantify military victory, then they have that. But in actual fact, strategically, they haven't moved the dial yet. So in terms of Israel and Netanyahu's political future, it was already in jeopardy before this war. He was undergoing a judicial overhaul that would curtail the powers of the Supreme Court, which launched the biggest protest movement in Israel's history. And, of course, the failure of intelligence, the failure of preparedness in October 7th would seal his political future and open him up to investigations, already corruption investigations before October 7th, but open him up to an accounting for these dreadful failures of Israeli intelligence and security. And so he's extremely in jeopardy. And the continuity of this war serves him well.
Ahmed Helal, we appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed for being with us.
Thank you.